good. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fame Week, MIP Africa 2023. Today's session is going to be hopefully quite helpful for many of you who are here and hopefully quite informative. We've got a great panel with us. My name is Sivan Pillay. I'm the CEO of Trace Studios. To my left, we have Mauro Black, who is Director of Sales and Distributions for MultiChoice Studios. We have Mandy Pienaar. Mandy, hello. Mandy from NBC Universal is Sales Liaison VP for Sales. And then we have Tshepo Skosana from Meraki Studios. Now, it's an interesting panel because they kind of represent three different aspects of the industry, and hopefully, with a very secure line of questioning, we'll get some good information from them. And if we have enough time, we'll take some questions from the floor as well. So we'll get straight into it. The session today is about unveiling the desires, what buyers want in the film and TV market in Africa. Now, it's quite an important question because we meet with a lot of creators, and creators that generally don't have access to the analytics that a lot of the streamers or broadcasters have, and how they look into content and how they spend their money on content and what they're looking to buy. So hopefully we can unpack some of those trends today. And we'll start with Mauro to my left. Mauro, from your side, a MultiChoice Studios perspective, what are kind of the key components for your business now as a studios, especially with your focus on distribution?
Thanks, man. Can everyone hear me? Cool. Hello and welcome. Thank you, Sivan. So I think for MultiChoice Studios, it all started, in fact, it started before my time. You know, Mandy was doing the very same job a few years back. I think the difference is as we change strategy from focusing on Africa or African buyers to going overseas, to going internationally, and the lessons that came from that. And I think, you know, for us, there's a couple of things. I won't spend too much time talking about, you know, the technical assets or technical requirements, which is so important for an overseas buyer, but more a case of actually trying to remain focused and true to what it is that we're selling. We're not necessarily, or we don't want to compete with the Hollywood, you know, studio. It is what are we good at, you know, what do we understand, who's our clients, our audiences, and taking that out there. So remaining authentic, that's probably been one of the biggest lessons. As I said, always underpinned by technical requirements. You can't sell something if you don't have the assets, if you don't have the clearances. These are things that will then derail any deal. So yeah, keeping focused, keeping true to what it is that you're trying to sell or get out there, create, and making sure that we can deliver.
Thanks, Mauro. And just moving back to Mandy. Mandy, welcome.
Hi.
And nice to have you on the panel, Mandy. Now, from your side, it's a slightly different perspective because you kind of sell into the market, right? And it's a mix of local and international. What have you seen as the key things that are defining the trends at the moment as you approach the market locally?
I mean, obviously, the biggest thing is local is king at the moment. It's a huge focus. But what we're finding is where you're getting a very strong balance between really popular, well-known international brands that everybody's heard of, everybody has seen, in particular series. Our big procedural series do extraordinarily well. Anything that is strong, has really strong talents. When you're getting that balance between local and international, that's when you seem to be finding the sweet spots. When you look across all of the big streamers across the continent, they're obviously increasing their local content on the platform astronomically right now, which is fantastic because local is very, very important. But what they are doing is they're carrying some of the bigger, stronger international brands, in particular also their own productions that they're busy doing, bringing new content into the market. So it's, for me, the balance is great. Obviously, I'm on the international side, but what we also have a formats division that we produce our own local formats. So, for example, like The Real Housewives that everybody would have seen on Showmax, which is doing phenomenally well. And we have a number of other local formats that we're bringing into the territory. So international that you are then localizing to bring local more into the market. That's when we're finding that the streamers are doing very, very well. They're more successful, is when you're getting a good balance of both.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mandy. Moving to you, Tshepo, Ty, Skosana. Now, Ty is a creator and a producer, so I thought it was interesting that he was on the panel because he represents, I think, a very typical producer who's got to create ideas and pitch them to streamers, to platforms, to look for distribution for you, what are the key challenges in the market as a creator in terms of analytics and insights? What do you have access to, and what do you need access to?
Well, I mean, right now it's actually getting to know what each of the different platforms or distributors actually want. Each of them do have their own type of strategies. I mean, if you look at the DSTVs of the world, they have a hyper-localized approach. You have the streamers which have local for local or local for international. So it's a very interesting space in which we're trying to find a sweet spot in terms of what type of content we're making. Right now, the challenge is actually trying to differentiate or define what African content looks like and what that is. And each one of the different platforms or the distributors seems to have a different definition for each one of those things. So the hard part is actually getting to know each and every one of the different players, and then getting to understand what they want in terms of what they're trying to achieve. Seems like they're wanting to see the same thing, but if you look a little bit closer, it's a little bit different. Mandy just mentioned where you're having some platforms looking for a more international approach, whereas others are looking to resonate more locally in order to generate subscriptions and so on and so forth.
Okay, thanks, Ty. That was, I think, scratching the surface for us just to get warmed up. But to dive into a bit more detail, I think the business models are changing in television. I think historic commissions are still there, obviously, to get a full commission. But I think more and more producers are becoming aware of the potential hybrid models of how to own their IP, how to find multiple funding strategies to be able to get their content made. But the most important thing underneath that, and the key to this business, is actually distribution. If there's sufficient distribution demand on the other side and wherever we're selling to, then there'll always be sufficient funding coming in. So starting with that, going back to Mauro, in terms from a MultiChoice Studios point of view, what have you noticed has been the key trends in terms of demand by genre for international territories looking at South African content or African content?
So I think, going back to what was said in terms of, each stream or each buyer is looking for something. Everyone's looking for content, but, it's knowing the various nuances and what it is that each one wants. And with that, I mean, we have definitely noticed a massive shift in terms of, who's buying the content. It's no longer just, paid for platforms. There's massive growth, on the streamer side. And for us in particular, it's been documentaries. So documentaries there's a massive demand for it. Real, true, authentic stories, that have been covered by the press, that are, well known in the media. That seems to resonate in absolutely every single market. So we're pushing a lot of that on our side. And then there's the evergreens, so dramas and telenovelas continues doing well for us as MultiChoice Studios. But certainly where we find, nice big sweet spots of acquisition, it's with documentaries.
Fantastic, thank you, Mauro. Moving to Mandy, slightly different. On the same topic though, what do you think are the key economic factors for streamers to be able to grow and continue investing? Because that's the key thing. There has to be some sort of ROI for whether it's Netflix, whether it's Amazon, to continue investing in the market and to see the growth. Or for any other streamer coming in or SVOD platform, what are the key economic factors, given that obviously Peacock is an NBC product,
Absolutely. I think some of the biggest problems in Africa, as everybody's very aware of, is the barriers to entry here are vast. Outside of South Africa, and I'm going to speak specifically outside of South Africa, because whilst we have many millions of people in South Africa, you're not garnering the far larger markets. The obvious problems are no access to bank accounts, the inability to do a direct debit order or to set up a monthly payment, disposable income even, on a monthly basis. To pay $10 on a monthly basis for most people outside of South Africa is extremely difficult. Internet access, that is a huge, huge barrier to entry. So I do feel there's a shift coming. I have felt a definite shift in the market over the last couple of months in terms of the rights that people are requesting, the buyers are requesting. And I think where you can be a little bit more compromising on the rights that you are granting. So I'll give you an example of some of the sorts of rights that you may or may not have heard of that are coming up a lot more in negotiations and in discussions with when you're licensing your content. I don't know if we're made up of mostly buyers or sellers here, but either way. When you're distributing your content is rights such as sachet rights. So as you know, at the moment, you want to subscribe to Showmax or Netflix or Amazon, you're paying a monthly subscription fee, it's debited off your account. Sachet rights are when you're granting someone the ability to subscribe for today only, or for a week, or for a weekend. And the fantastic thing about that is that it gives somebody who's based in Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, or any of the other African countries who does not have a bank account, because a lot of people outside of South Africa do not have access to credit cards. It gives them the ability to have disposable income on a weekend. My kids are on school holidays. I'm going to subscribe for the weekend so they can watch kids' content. That's fantastic. Massively important, and I think first to win in terms of the streamers in particular will be those who partner with the telcos, where you do not have to have a bank account. So you do not have to have your money coming off your accounts every month. It can come off of your airtime. It can come off of your pay wallet, like M-Pesa in Kenya, for example. Absolutely key. Tiering rights. So at the moment, you can only access Amazon, Netflix, Showmax. Showmax has got 2 tiers. Obviously, Showmax Pro with the sports that's included, and then there's Showmax Standard, which is what most people do have if they don't watch the English Premier League. Tiering rights where Netflix, they are already doing, they're implementing a new advertising-funded tier, which will be slightly cheaper, a little bit more accessible. All of these things are extremely important in terms of bringing the right content to the market and reaching mass audience in Africa in particular. So I think if you are here as a seller or distributor or even producer, you're looking to sell your product, is to look beyond just, massively important, like what is popular. And as Mauro very rightly said, I mean, the emergence of, I've watched, I'm sure everybody has watched Rosemary's Hit List on Showmax, mind-blowing, or Devil's Daughter, extremely important. Unscripted is huge. Whether it be unscripted on the crime side or documentary side or even on the reality side, also absolutely huge. Your content is important, but start to look a little bit beyond just the content. Look at the next step. Is it in the right format? Am I granting the right rights to my buyers? And take that next step.
Thanks, Mandy. So, I think that ticks an important box in terms of our own understanding, right? Mauro has spoken about demand in genre, and you touched on that too. But it's that interest and demand, plus the economics and commercial side, that equal into potential yield of what can be spent and where it can be spent. So moving to Ty, as a producer and as a creator, right, what do you think, in your opinion, are the biggest challenges, knowing that these are the analytics? What are the biggest challenges as a creator to get to that point?
I think one of the hard things is reconciling the analytics with the creativity. The analytics tell us what people are watching, but they don't really go into depth as to why they're watching it. And if you can tell me why they're watching it, I'll give you $100 already, But the big thing for us is to find that reconciliation as to what the executives are seeing on their side in terms of the content that they want to make, and what as creatives allows us to be making that still authentic content, or African content as it is. So it's very difficult, because you're also starting to see trends where you're starting to see streamers starting to use adaptations as a way of kind of accessing the market. So content has started to have a look of an international feel to it. But I think still keeping to being original and trying to be as original as possible. We also have a thing where, as a country, we're still also reconciling how our content is heard, different languages and so on and so forth, as well as how it's looking. So it's very dependent on who you're speaking with and what their end game is. Whether they're looking at a very short-sighted strategy or a long strategy. If you're working with the DSTVs of the world, you want to make content, for example, that resonates, where language resonates as a part of it as well. And if you're looking internationally with international streamers, it's trying to understand how that looks to the international streamer, whether that can be in terms of language, are we dubbing, or are we going for pure authenticity in terms of their spaces. And we've seen really great films and series come out of that. I mean, if you look at Riker, which was one of the most recognizable, and that had an ability to resonate here and as well, but it had elements of local, authentic language as well as how it looked. It had that localization element part of it, you know. So it's how we kind of mix that localization with the international and what we're looking for. If we're looking for local in terms of resonance, or we're looking for local with international.
So I just want to say something on that, and I think, you know, it's not a fine line. I mean, you know, when it comes to creativity and then actually selling something, it's, I think we're partnering up with the right distributor or sub-distributor is so important, because it does eventually, as much as creative people don't want to hear about it, it does become a very clinical operation. And we need to be able to take that creativity and actually match it with the right distributor. There's plenty of content. There's beautiful content. As I said, you know, you stay authentic. Make sure that you're creating for you know, this purpose behind it. But aligning that content, you know, with the right distributor, especially when it comes to an overseas distributor or sub-distributor, is very, very key. Someone that will take all those nuances into account, understanding absolutely everything and taking your content to the right buyers, to the right platforms. It's so important. So remaining true to yourself, being creative, not compromising on that, but aligning with the right person, with the right company, the right sub-distributor is absolutely key. Someone who's already done all that work, you know, has a bit of as I said, a clinical approach to the work. It's not discounting or dismissing what you've done, but it's just understanding the analytics, understanding the right market, and, you know, doing it justice.
I won't lie to you. The analytics do strip away, to a certain point, the nuances that are there. There's a certain amount of conformity that needs to happen, which is what I'm kind of debating, is whether we are looking at the analytics as what people are watching it, but we're not able to rectify why they're watching it. What is exactly in that piece of content that is resonating? So that's the...
So if I could just touch on that. I think just picking from what you're saying, and I understand exactly what you're saying, but I think that's where the biggest challenge in the market is. And we'll start there by an example, right? If a broadcaster, say like MultiChoice, does commission a show, and let's assume it's a scripted show, for Mzansi Magic particularly, the key part of the commission team's objective is actually to make sure that show works for Mzansi Magic, not necessarily built for distribution, international distribution. The second part of that, now that it's made, it's got to be distributed, and that's where it comes to you. Where do you see that big challenge, and what can be done to close that gap? Is it possible to close that gap, or is that gap too far apart?
It is possible to close the gap. I think, you know, if you're producing something for a particular audience, particular market, there's always an opportunity. And I think with the amount of platforms out there, there's always something. There's always someone that will buy it, someone that will view it. In terms of closing the gap, you can't be all things to all people. That's impossible. So what is the primary audience? What is the primary objective? Build it for that, create it for that, produce it for that. And then going back to aligning with the right distribution company to actually take it out there. It's not going to be on every single platform, and that, you know, you need to accept immediately. Or it may be, you know, stuck on several AVOD platforms around the world. But, you know, it's a tough question. You know, can you close the gap? I think you get into a bit of a messy space.
But it's a good debate, right? I mean, I think it's a point to hand over to Mandy now to also say, I mean, from an international perspective, let's assume that was the case, and the status quo remains the same for the next few years, that there's hyper-localized content, but there's also, we consume international content. Do you foresee a time, and I don't know what the time frame is, where international companies will be looking for more content from African or South African producers that are purely for export as opposed to local consumption, where the local consumption becomes the B scenario? It's the second window, you know? Do you foresee that happening?
Absolutely, and it should be. I mean, if I'll refer specifically to NBC Universal, I mean, I'm sure everyone's quite familiar with the sheer volume of the content that we produce. I mean, everybody has watched Jurassic and Fast and Furious and every other series, all the Chicago franchise, etc. And whilst there's that business in the US is huge. The business that we do outside of the US is 10 times bigger. 10 times bigger. International distribution is absolutely key. So it's great having something do well within your home continent, but if you really, really want to grow your business and you really want to generate more revenue, you need to look beyond that. You need to make it internationally appealing, and that's not to say you need to change the tone or the content, but the biggest challenge I find, and this is coming from someone who, when I was at MultiChoice, I did both buying and selling, so I've been on the acquisition side as well. And the biggest barrier here that I find is when people are producing content, the local content is not export ready. So it is not done in the correct formats, it's not in the correct aspect ratios, it does not have music cue sheets, music and effects. You require all of these things. You need scripts, you need hard of hearing scripts, you need images, you need stills, you need promos, you need everything that you can distribute, because what people want to do is they want to take it, they want to advertise it. They need a cast, they need the directors, they need episodic synopsis. And you need to do all of this at the very beginning stages. So when you're producing, plan and budget to include that already in your production from day one. You can't approach a buyer, and as again, I get approached even in distribution now, but I still get approached all the time by people who are distributing content. And they'll approach me and they've filmed something, and it's beautiful. It looks great. It definitely has legs to travel internationally, but there's no music and effects sheet. So that means it can't be dubbed into a foreign language. There are no hard of hearing scripts. There is no episode synopsis. So you know yourself, you go onto Netflix, Amazon Showmax, you open up a series, you select it. The first thing it has the duration, it has an episode synopsis, an episode title. It has all of the details that are required that pull the viewer in, like, oh, hang on a minute, this is and again, I'll refer back to the documentaries. This is a crime series. I don't want to watch that one. I have 3 boys. I don't particularly enjoy watching anything that's crime that is around kids, so I know I'll skip it. There's no episode synopsis. I probably just won't take the risk of watching it in case there are kids involved. That's just a personal. Be export ready. Think bigger beyond just your production and producing a beautiful piece of content that will probably travel well. And what's interesting is that I tend to find that most people are looking to produce content that they think will appeal only to Africa or African diaspora, and you'll be surprised at how well our content actually rates overseas. It does very well. People are interested. They're curious. There's a real fascination with Africa. So take advantage of that, but plan up front and be prepared and take that extra step.
Thank you, Mandy. Quite a detailed answer. And I think quite specifically answering the question what buyers want, and what will work. But moving into that in terms of hyper-localization, which is obviously quite an important topic, because what is the definition of hyper-localization? For every creator, it means something different. Ty, for you, you've heard the word African storytelling as an example, right?
I won't lie to you. I absolutely hate these marketing terms that they come up with, that executives start using: hyper-localization, local for local. It ends up looking the same. Right now, the conversations, and it was very interesting that Mandy was speaking about it, and you've mentioned it about catering to the diaspora. We've seen that there's absolutely a wanting for that content. That's why you see movies like I Am King, for example. But that's also kind of taken away from what we're trying to do as African creatives in terms of trying to create our own identity as to what African stories are. I don't see a lot of Americans going, I tell American stories. And so for me, it's quite important that these terminologies and these phrasings, they're very, very in tune to what each company is doing. And you have to know what that ecosystem says and what that ecosystem seems to mean. But in terms of what the content looks like, that is what I'm interested in. In terms of what we're actually making, in terms of how does it actually look, what genres are actually are biting, and so on and so forth. I want us to start to move away from constantly having to be told that melodrama is the baseline, and then everything else in every other subgenre can kind of tap into that. I would like African stories to have a more diverse look in terms of the genres in which we are able to explore. So, in terms of... Oh, sure, go ahead.
May I ask at that point, right? What do you think is a better definition of African storytelling? Is that people are telling an African story, or that an African storyteller is telling a story?
an African is telling a story.
Yeah, I agree.
That for me it quantifies everything. I mean, it will allow us to then explore the different genres in which we would like to go into. It will allow us to look at different narrative structures and so on and so forth. So it will allow us to go and explore and create an identity as to what Africa's story looks like. I mean, we should really take what's happened in places like South Korea as a way of looking at it. I mean, they've created their own genres. I mean, if you look at K-drama, I mean, that's a genre specific to South Korea.
Careful.
No, I need to be careful. It's catered to South Korea. And then now when we're looking at the African content, what does that look like? Does it look like Shaka? Absolutely. But does it also maybe look like Five Fingers of Marseille, which was a Western kind of look?
Possibly, yeah.
So there's the different contrasts and the different spaces in which we're exploring. But that also gets hindered by the analytics, because the analytics says that we haven't really gone there, and therefore we cannot explore, and therefore we don't have enough numbers.
That's where Mauro and Mandy were talking about, and that's quite an important factor, because in an ideal world, that'll be exactly the case. And I agree with you, POVs, that African storytelling comes from people from Africa telling stories, and it could be any story, right? That's really the idea. However, at the end of that, there's got to be sufficient demand when it is made. Like there was demand for nouveau and demand for commercial movies, the same thing. There has to be a balance between the two. So you have to have projects that are able to make ROIs for businesses so they can be justified, but at the same time have projects which are worthy of being called pieces of art that send a specific message and a narrative message to the rest of the world. And finding that hybrid for a creative is the hardest thing. And what I'm deducing from what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you had access to more of the data, you can make a more informed decision in what you invest your creativity in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that data is the new gold, so it's important to absolutely know that. And each of these companies guard their data tremendously. But knowing that data helps me as a creative to absolutely understand the audience in which you're trying to reach. I remember when I did work for DSTV, it gave us a picture of who that audience member was. And as a creative, if I know who that audience member is, it makes it much easier for me to create the content that caters to that audience. Yeah. So absolutely, that analytics plays a really, really great part. And if I had more understanding of what that audience member looks like, absolutely, it makes it easier to create the content that's suited. But it's hard to get that information.
Now, cool. Moving to you, Mauro. There's been a lot of talk about analytics and data and things. How much does that play in a role in terms of analytics you are getting in from your sales, feeding back into the MultiChoice business?
So analytics from our sales, it's fairly closed in terms of what we get back. We get back from our buyers, of course, if an asset has performed well, we get that top line information, which then influences what happens in renegotiations. So we do get that. With the streamers, we do not get a lot of that granular detail, but it's very much top line stuff that we would use to feed back into our business.
So shrouded in mystery.
Shrouded in mystery, yeah.
Okay.
Look, it is. I mean, for us, then on the other side, in terms of the analytics that we use when we're promoting something, if it's a new title, new piece of content, obviously there's very little to go on besides the focus groups and other anecdotal information to use. But fortunately, with a lot of the content which is now sitting in the library, we do draw on how has it performed in country. How has it performed on Showmax, or how has it performed on Mzansi? And we use that to give the buyer an indication. Again, a buyer in the US, or a buyer in Australia, or a buyer in Greece is slightly different, but it does give a bit of comfort, to the person acquiring that content that it performed well. So we tend to use a lot more of our own data, a lot more of our analytics, when we're driving, when we're pushing a particular deal.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Mauro. And moving to you, Mandy. Now, I think it's for context for everybody, right? Because I'm trying to represent and get a sense of all points of view here. There is a reason why some of these numbers are shrouded in mystery. What are the key reasons for that?
So I feel very two sides of the coin on the data analytics, and I'll explain why. So everyone is chasing the analytics always. I get it. I understand that. But I mean, if you are I'll say Peacock because I don't want to refer to any of the existing streamers. So Peacock is our own platform, which is huge in the US, but hasn't launched in Africa. We're not going to come to you and say, oh my goodness, the thing that is rating the absolute best is our Real Housewives, unscripted, trashy reality, because you're just going to go out and replicate that. You're going to buy as much of that content. So we're going to keep that information to ourselves. I do always feel like data is fantastic. I think a little bit more in retrospect as opposed to in advance. In retrospect, you can look back and say, okay, well, we bought this piece of content. It did extremely well for us. It was worth the money that we paid, the license fee that we paid for it. Or we bought this piece of content, we paid X amounts of license fees, and it didn't rate so well for us. We won't pay as much for it next time around, or we won't acquire it the next time around. So it helps to shape your strategy going forward. But that being said, data can only rate what's in existence on the platform. Nobody could have said, if you'd come to me with Squid Games, the head of Netflix buying it, and said, how do you think this will do based on your data? Nobody would have bought that title. Yeah. Netflix then invested, they took a chance, and look at how it exploded. So the data is absolutely, and you are 100%, and everyone's chasing the data for sure, but data can only rate what's there. It doesn't rate all the new stuff that's coming. It didn't rate the unbelievable popularity of Devil's Dorp that went onto Showmax, which phenomenal piece of content in terms of the content for what it showed. I mean, it was really, I was riveted. It did not rate Rosemary's Hit List. You know, nobody could have forecasted that Showmax was going to start to invest money into unscripted crime. I mean, like real life shows. Like I could not have seen that coming, and now it's in amongst their top 10 almost every week after week. So if somebody had,
I think the same can be said for Barbie, right?
100%. Same
Right,
could be
Milton?
said for Barbie. 100%.
I mean, no one expected it.
Oh, we always thought it was going to do well, but
exactly. Okay.
biased.
She's in pink too.
So whilst the ratings are great, the data is great, I mean, it's not rocket science right now, at least. Let's put it that way. I mean, and you've asked it, and I think we've all kind of not intentionally skirted around giving you the answer. What do buyers want right now? It's unscripted and it's dramas. That's really what it comes down to. Feature films, tough in terms of local, because the international we drown out. I mean, we bring out a new Top Gun, a new Fast and Furious, whatever's comes out from the studios. It dominates news, it dominates media. So feature films, unless you are really good and you know what you're making, you have the money to invest. Series, just in terms of what's rating well, series are rating very well. Unscripted series are rating well. Real Housewives rates well. A look into people's personal lives. You've seen the what is it on Showmax? Your new... That's it, the Mummy Club. It does extremely well. Crime does extremely well. Real life documentary crime. People seem to really enjoy these looks into, but that's very female focused. So you're sort of 25 to 45
procedurals.
Target demographic. And that's what's doing very well. And then, of course, your local dramas, the long-running dramas, those obviously do extremely well. I mean, you can see that they show their own numbers. But there's always room for something new and something a little bit different. And that's what I keep waiting for. I keep waiting to see something a little bit new and different come out of Africa, and I'm still waiting to see that.
Thanks, man. I've got two final questions. First one to Mauro, the second one to Ty. Mauro, in a hypothetical situation, should a creator come to you with a potential idea, what type of idea as a buyer would you be looking to invest in?
So acquiring
Ideas.
something. Yeah. Look, it's. I think again, we just look at. We've spoken a lot about data and information and trends, and I would be looking at procedurals, or I'd be looking at documentaries. That's it. That's where it's a sure bet. That's where I know we can make some money, where we can sell it with ease. Procedurals, again, that's an interesting space. It keeps on coming up. Obviously, it's a bit more money to invest to create that. But there's, as I said, Sivan, there's a market for everything. And but yeah, documentaries, procedurals.
Okay, thank you, Mauro.
That's quite interesting. A few years ago, we were told stay away from procedurals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it kind of changes depending on what trends are actually happening
change.
at the.
That's, I think the thing with trends, it's that over time it changes. And there are multiple socioeconomic factors that affect that globally, right? I mean, the way people consume media now, the way gaming is intervened in watch hours, the way streaming works, the way fast channels work has all impacted the time available for people and also the age groups available to those time slots. So trends will always change, and I think our idea is to keep an eye on the trends and however it shapes to find the best solution in that particular moment. Which brings me back to my last question to you, Ty. As a seller and as a creator, what is it that you are hoping that buyers want to buy from you?
Authenticity. I think that that's the buzzword right now. I think that, you know, you can hear different analytics from different buyers and so on and so forth, but I think if you create that niche of being authentic, I think that that's an opportunity for you to differentiate yourself first and foremost, and to offer your buyer or your client something different to what's been on the market at the moment. So I think if you remain true to yourself and you remain true to creating authentic content, I think then you'll find the opportunities are already there for you. And I think that will be a space where we'll find different types of content being made. I think that every one of the different platforms have got their own strategy. I think it's important and vital as a creative that you get an understanding of what that is, that proposition that's being offered, understand what they want and what they need, but also try to remain true to yourself, because as I said, and I've been trying to say through this whole conversation, each one of them kind of wants a different of the same. That's nice English, right? All right, cool.
Thank you. And thanks to all the panelists for your valuable insights and thoughts on this particular area. We have time for a few questions, maybe 2 or 3, that we can possibly answer. So the floor is open to whomever wants to ask a question, to anyone on the panel. There's one there, one there. My eyesight is terrible, so I'm just saying one there, but I have no idea.
Sorry, Miss Mandy, I used bad language.
So please introduce yourself before your question.
Hi, my name is Mikhail Malik. I'm a freelance television producer, largely working in the reality space. My question is to the panel in general, to whoever feels like answering it. There's been a lot of conversation around analytics, and there was a sense of like that they don't tell you why they're watching. I feel like turning to social media and seeing what people are saying about your show or saying about a particular show out there. Oh, sorry. That could be a sense of why, because they're discussing their favorite parts of the show. They're discussing what they like, what they don't like about certain characters or certain parts of the show. What role does social media play and the sentiment on social media play in what you decide to buy and what is something worth buying?
Can I answer that? It's unreliable, especially when it comes to social media. Social media is a tester almost of what the content is, because you can have your audience on social media being appalled but still being excited. You understand? So it isn't in terms of making content and so on and so forth. But it's a way of kind of gauging if there is a sort of resonance. And that's how I used to use social media, especially in the creation of content, is that once I've created the content and thereafter, kind of start seeing what resonated and whether it was positive or negative. But it isn't and should not be used as a matrix.
Cool, thank you. Mandy or Mauro, any thoughts on that there, or are you fine?
Just that it's
Happy with
a
that?
nice supporting tool.
Yeah.
That's it. But it should not be the definitive, focal point of a strategy. Yeah.
There was another question down there.
Can you guys hear me? Hello. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Hey, hi. I'm Connor Rhoda. I'm a freelancer and animation concept developer. So, I guess my question to you is, what's the largest difference between people who are trying to produce animation in South Africa and to live action in South Africa?
I think I'm happy to take this. So,
Go for it, man.
We own DreamWorks and Illumination, so I'll speak. So we distribute like a ton of animated content. There's a huge demand for both. If it's a strong piece of content, but what is missing here is local African animation, anything that speaks to Africa itself. I mean, there just isn't. There's not much out there. Every piece of animated content that I've seen that has come out of Africa, and I haven't seen it all, obviously, but the bits that I have seen is trying to replicate an American animated piece of content. And what I'd really love to see, what I haven't yet seen at least, is strong local animation. As for between animation and live action, it's just two different audiences. Animation is your preschool, so if your target is preschool, depending on who you're approaching on acquiring your content, if your target is preschool, especially when you're looking at your free TV channels, they tend to opt for preschool because SABC TV, they put on, in the morning, moms are getting ready, we're rushing, so we put on the TV. So preschool, and then you're looking at animated. Once you're starting to move into that preteen, so kind of like 6 to 10, 6 to 12, live action seems to be a lot more popular, and then you are looking a lot more at the streamers as well, because that's when your kids are able to go on yourself and select something that they want to watch. So it just depends on who your target audience, your demographic is.
Can I just add to that? Another problem that we're having is in regards to the different timelines. Animation timelines are over 5 years periods, whatever periods, and live animation. So when we're starting to have those conversations, for example, with the DTI and stuff, and articulating what that is, we're having a little bit of problems getting that through to them. So it doesn't necessarily speak to what the content looks like, but why there are differences in terms of how we're making them and when we're making them as readily as we would like. It's a very niche market at the moment, but there have been a lot of great things that have come out of it. I mean, Disney came out with those 5 films, those Afrofuturistic films that have come out, bringing in a number of African animators and companies. You had Chocolate Tribe there, you had Triggerfish there, and you had a couple of other African studios participating. So it's it's an exciting space, but obviously a very, very difficult space to kind of get into just because of the timelines and so on and so forth. But it's a great space, mate.
Cool, thank you guys, thanks. Last question from the corner.
Ooh, pressure. Hi there, I'm Angela from Red Hat Global. Thank you for taking your time to be on this panel. It's really great, thank you. A question for Mauro. Do you mind sharing with us the type of documentaries MultiChoice are looking for?
Yes, so, well, Mandy's mentioned Devil's Dorp many times, which has been a huge success. Steinheist is also a great one. Rosemary's Hit List. She's off the top of my head. Then Chasing the Sun. So those are some of the ones that we...
End of the scale, Chasing the Sun, which is helpful.
Yes,
but
as helpful and
for
inspiring.
program suppliers, documentary suppliers, the kind of documentaries we should be sending to your buying team, the type of documentaries.
Crime thriller?
I think, look,
Series,
crime...
one-offs.
Crime is, and it's, we want to say unfortunately or fortunately, whatever the fascination is, but crime works. Crime continues always paying off. Wow. That sounded terrible. Crime.
Cool, thank you. And thanks everyone for attending the session. Thank you, Mauro, Mandy, and Ty. We appreciate your time and your energy in the session, and thank you to all. Thank you.